Hello everyone. Today we will examine the question of the benefits of working through the ordinary archetype in esotericism. In the esoteric tradition, working with the ordinary archetype is seen as a deep inner initiation, the path of the sage, the mage, and the guide between worlds. Below are the key benefits of this work. Access to deep wisdom. Odin embodies hidden knowledge and intuition. Working with this archetype activates the inner observer, helps you read between the lines of events, sharpens the ability to synthesize knowledge and think symbolically, development of mental strength and concentration. This is the archetype of the strategist and the thinker. Trains focus and endurance. Enhances the ability to work with the large volumes of information. Helps make calm, balanced decisions free from emotional noise. Initiation through sacrifice. The myth of Odin's sacrifice symbolizes conscious loss for the sake of growth, letting go of old identities, dependencies, and illusions, transition to a new level of maturity, willingness to pay the price for one's true calling, enhancement of magical and intuitive sensitivity. In esotericism, this archetype is associated with working with symbols, runes, shamanic states of consciousness, dreams, visions, and signs. This deepens contact with the subconscious and subtle levels of perception, acceptance of the shadow and solitude. Odin is a loner and wanderer. Working through this archetype helps you stop running from the shadow aspects of the psyche, builds inner support without external validation, teaches wholeness even in solitude, formation of the inner teacher archetype. As a result, the ability to guide emerges first oneself, later others. The sense of mission and path strangeness. Life a perceived learning and initiation, not chaos. Important. Working with the Odin archetype is not an easy path. It may activate a crisis of meaning, periods of isolation, the need for deep inner honesty. But this is precisely what makes it transformative. Markers that indicate the stage of working through the Odin archetype has been completed. Below are the key signs that the stage of working through the Odin archetype has ended or moved into a major integrated phase. Important, this is not the end of the path, but the completion of an initiatory cycle, silence instead of tension. The inner drama of seeking disappears. There is no constant need to dig, analyze, or prove. Knowledge is presented even when you are not thinking about it. Wisdom becomes a background state, not an obsessive task. Clarity without mystical excitement. Intuition works calmly and practically, fewer symbolic signs, but more precise decisions. You trust understanding rather than chasing visions. Magic has integrated into everyday reality, releasing the rule of the hermit. Solitude no longer hurts or pulls you away. You can be with people without losing depth. You can be silent or speak by choice, not out of necessity. The archetype no longer isolates you. Knowledge cases to be an end in self. No compulsive learning just in case you apply exactly what is needed. A sense of I know enough. The sage stops accumulating and begins to live. The shadow is integrated, not endlessly explored. No urge to constantly dig into the shadow. Dark sides no longer freeness of fascinate. There is sober self-acceptance without romanticizing pain. The shadow becomes an ally, not a battlefield. A simple direction appears, not a source for meaning, but a quiet vector. Fewer questions like who am I and more actions like this is what I do. Life feels gathered and current. After initiation, the path emerges. No need to call it an archetype. One of the clearest markers you no longer identify with the archetype. It has become part of the psyche, not an image. There is no need to feed it with attention. An archetype releases you once it has been integrated, imported conscience. Sometimes, it may feel as though the stage is complete, but is only a pause before a new level. True completion is felt not as emptiness, but as a calm sense of fullness. In other words, when you genuinely want to go outside, talk to people, and you clearly know who you are and in which direction to work next. This is a classic marker that the Odinic stage has been integrated, not merely lived through. What this actually means in essence. Return to the world. A natural desire appears to engage with people without losing yourself. Contact no longer drains you or blurs your identity. There is no need to hide, but also no need to prove anything. This is the state of I am with myself, even among others. Identity is no longer a question. Who am I? No longer creates inner noise. There is a clear sense of rule, function, vector. You can explain yourself briefly or not explain yourself at all. This is not a concept, but an inner fact. Direction is not disgust, it is implement. Less reflection, more action. Planning becomes simple and practical. Doubts may exist, but they do not paralyze. Wisdom has turned it into craft. The hermit has completed their work. You are no longer living in a constant mode of initiation. Solitude is now a choice, not a necessity. Death is preserved, but it no longer isolates. Silence is a resource, not a hiding place. A very important nuance. This does not mean that the archetype has disappeared. It has stopped ruling and has become an inner support. In psychological terms, the archetype stops being a figure and becomes a function. What usually comes next? After this state, not a mystical but a social archetype often activates. Teacher, mentor, transmission, not searching, master, practical realization, and traveler in the world of people, not symbols. The next archetype is Norse mythology. If the Odinic stage in initiation, wisdom, solitude is truly complete, then within Norse mythological logic, the next archetype must often becomes Tyr. Although there are two close alternatives. Let's go step by step. The primary next archetype Tyr. Why Tyr becomes after Odin? Odin is knowledge and vision. Tyr is law, action, and responsibility in the human world. You move from I understand who I am to I act according to this even when it is uncomfortable. Key markers of the Tyr archetype. A clear inner code. What is right, what is not. Readiness to take responsibility without heroics. The ability to keep one's word even when it has a cost. Action-based not on impulse, but on principle. Methodologically, Tyr loses his hand, but does not withdraw from the argument. This is the archetype of honest strength, not chaotic power. In short, Tyr is I know who I am and I live this publicly. Alternative 1, Thor, activates if after integration physical energy sharply increases. There is a desire to act, protect, build rather than structure. An impulse appears to go out and do. Thor is strange in the body, protection of simple values, grounding after depth. Often comes after Tyr, but sometimes activates immediately. Alternative 2, Heimdall, less common but possible if you feel yourself on the boundary of systems, you see where everything is moving and warn others, you become an observer of processes in society. Heimdall is the archetype of the guardian, not action but readiness. To better work through and understand the Odin archetype, we touch on the Loki archetype. Loki can help to understand and work through Odin more deeply but indirectly. The essence. How Loki opens Odin. In mythological and psychological terms, Loki and Odin are a pair of poles that work only together. Loki as Odin's shadow. Odin is the god of order, knowledge, power, and sacrifice of the sake of meaning. Loki is chaos, rule-breaking, irony, and the destruction of illusions. By working through Loki, you encounter lies and through manipulation, inner sabotage, the breaking of taboos. This is the shadow side of Odin's power and wisdom. Without awareness of this shadow, Odin becomes a rigid tyrant or a dead god of rules without living force. Loki as a catalyst of awareness. Loki does not let Odin stagnate. He forces the gods to look at the consequences of their own decisions, exposes self-deception, triggers crises without which there is no evolution. If you are working through Odin, the archetype of the leader, father, strategist, seeker of knowledge, Loki will show where control has become excessive, wisdom has turned into cold calculation, power has lost its ethical balance. Without Loki, Odin is incomplete. In-depth psychology. Odin is conscious, structure, meaning, will. Loki, unconscious, dynamics, irony, chaos. Working only with Odin leads to spiritual narcissism, rigid perfectionism, fear of making mistakes. Loki, on the other hand, teaches how to end uncertainty, how to laugh at one's own wisdom, how to accept destruction as part of growth. Conclusion. Yes, Loki helps to understand Odin better because he illuminates Odin's shadow, initiates transformation, prevents power and knowledge from petrifying. But this is important. Loki is a tool, not the center. If you get stuck in him, there will be chaos without meaning. If you integrate him, Odin becomes alive, wise, and whole. If we look at it from another angle, through Jungian archetypes or through personal psychological work, leadership, the father figure in a conflict, or through a mystical, esoteric lens. This question can be placed in any context. Here, Loki is not a character but a function of the psyche, one you either cooperate with or one that destroys from within. Loki as a Jungian archetype. His true place in the psyche. Loki is a trickster plus shadow plus threshold agent of transformation. This is not chaos for the sake of chaos. It is energy that appears when the ego lives in falsehood, even a spiritual one. Loki arises where the structure has lost its truthfulness. 3. Deep function. 1. Revealer of self-deception. Loki does not break reality, he breaks the illusion of control. Psychologically, this appears as sarcasm toward one's own values, inner sabotage, strange mistakes, procrastination of what matters, distraction of what seems to be working. If Loki is active, there is some untruth the ego does not want to see. 2. Disruptor of identity. Loki is a shape-shifter. He is the archetype that destroys a fixed self. Inner signals. I no longer know who I am. Loss of old rules. Irony toward one's own image. A desire to go beyond gender, social, moral boundaries. This is not a crisis but a pre-transformational state. 3. Catalyst of the inevitable. Loki accelerates what was destined to collapse anyway. In life, this looks like abrupt breakthroughs, scandals out of nowhere, provocations, revelations, Ragnarok-like periods. If we resist Loki, the explosion will be greater. If we cooperate with him, transformation becomes controlled. The dark side of Loki important. If not integrated, Loki turns into cynicism, lies for the sake of power, manipulation, addictions, destruction without new meaning. This is the shadow of the trickster, its most dangerous form. The trickster archetype is revealed extremely clearly through Loki and helps us understand several deep truths about the human being, the psyche, and society. What the trickster reveals. The trickster shows where the system is false. Loki constantly breaks the rules of Asgard, mock Odin's authority, exposes the hypocrisy of the gods. The trickster archetype teaches that order is not always truth, and rules often serve not justice, but the convenience of the powerful. He embodies the shadow we do not want to acknowledge. Loki represents envy, resentment, the desire for recognition, anger born from rejection. Through him we see that repressed feelings do not disappear, they begin to destroy from within. The trickster reminds us if the shadow is not integrated, it becomes destructive. The trickster is an agent of change. Without Loki, the world there will be no crisis, no transformation of heroes, no movement of the story. This archetype shows that chaos is not the enemy of development, but its catalyst. Loki creates problems, but it is precisely these problems that force the world to change. He destroys identities to find the real one. Loki is central in a drama. Who am I? Why was I not accepted? Am I a god or a monster? The trickster helps us understand that an identity crisis is not weakness, but a stage of maturation and self-awareness. Ambivalence, neither good nor evil. Loki saves, betrays, jokes, destroys, helps, manipulates. The trickster archetype teaches us to think beyond black and white morality. Real life is more complex than a division into heroes and villains. What this gives us personally. Through Loki, the trickster archetype helps us understand why we sabotage ourselves, why we sometimes destroy what we desire, why humor, irony, and provocation are ways of survival. Inside each of us, there is a little Loki. The question is not how to destroy him, but how to learn to cooperate with him. In short, through Loki, the trickster teaches us to see falsehood in systems, accept our own shadow, not fear chaos as a source of growth, seek authenticity rather than approval. Odin teaches us responsibility for power and the price of knowledge. Power is duty, not privilege. Wisdom requires sacrifice of time, comfort, illusions. Control has limits. It is impossible to control everything and everyone. Fear of loss leads to rigidity. This is his main shadow. The Odin archetype shows that a true leader is not the one who controls everyone, but the one who can endure the consequences of their decisions. The Loki plus Odin tandem teaches balance between order and chaos. Odin provides structure, law, and responsibility. Loki tests this structure for falsehood and stagnation. Together, they show that without chaos, order turns into tyranny, and without order, chaos turns into destruction. This is a lesson of a mature psyche and healthy society. Strange lies not in the dominance of one archetype, but in their tension and dialogue. Thank you all.